I think it's become very fashionable to discredit, to denigrate this process of huge process of change that has been called the Arab Spring. If we look at what happened now, 6 years later, there's no question that it hasn't led to what people hoped for. Almost frankly, in every single situation of the countries that were affected by this wave of uprisings and popular protest. So I think, you know, if we look at it now, 6 years later, it's definitely a negative assessment that we would have about the results. There's no question. But I think, I think the question is a bit politicized in the way that you will find people will say, no, it was a disaster because they never would have wished for even such a thing to happen in the first place. I think so a lot of people are kind of happy to conclude that this has been a disastrous process, that it's not gone anywhere, and somehow in the Arab countries, the implication would be that people are not worthy of the same freedoms that people have anywhere else in the world. And I think fundamentally that's what's going on here, because we're talking about processes of economic, political control, which in any society in the world people would eventually break out against. But they are very, very strongly supported here by external factors, by internal factors. I think in the context today of globalization, the security arrangements between Western countries and governments in the region, it's become extremely difficult to fight back against those processes that are keeping the economic and political situation locked as it is within the Arab countries. But there are forces within, simply because the populations have become so large, because the number of people suffering by the system as it is in many countries are so many. You have a real pressure there. You have a real pressure between this very ingrained political situation and structure that's international and what's going on within the country, so you have real pressure there. So I think it's too much to say that it shouldn't happen, that it could not happen again, and any judgment that this is the end of the process, I think is far too early to say such a thing. I think this is something that's going to go on. I think we're still living in an Arab Spring paradigm. Let's put it like that. It's because simply the need, the desire to fight back against a system that is oppressive is not going to go away. Yes, it's definitely a negative judgment we can make right now. The cases are obvious. In Egypt, the situation with freedoms, let's say in a general sense, in Egypt, it's worse than it was under Mubarak. You know, there's no question. You could even compare it to the worst elements of Nasser's regime in Egypt. Obviously in Syria you have this absolutely disastrous civil war that is serving no good purpose whatsoever. It's been fed by different forces internationally. But it started as something quite different from what it's become. And the forces that are feeding the war have very bad intent. Some of the countries there wanted to turn this thing we're calling the Arab Spring, they wanted to turn it somewhere else. They wanted to direct it in a different direction, and to be able to say to their own people, you want an Arab Spring? Look at Syria. That's what Arab Spring is. So I think that Syria is the kind of is an absolute tragedy. But it's a very complicated one, and it's not just about, let's say, revolution, to use that term. Syria is also about counter-revolution, because the forces that are pushing this war in Syria are interested in counter-revolution much more than they are in revolution, many of them anyway. There's no question this is a disastrous situation. The suffering that has come in the last 6 years is huge, but people didn't go through it for nothing, and it's not over.